One false accusation, two cops, a public humiliation, and then her brother stepped in and flipped the script completely. It had been a long day at work. Emails, meetings, her boss throwing last-minute deadlines on her plate. All she wanted was to grab a few things from the store, head home, and kick off her heels. She pulled into the parking lot of Baker's Market, a small convenience store in Indianapolis, Indiana. Nothing fancy, just the kind of place you run into when you need something quick. As she stepped out of her car, she glanced at her phone. Her mom had texted, "Hey baby, don't forget to grab the tea, I love you." Tasha smiled, shaking her head. Her mother had a habit of reminding her. At the last minute, she walked inside the automatic doors hissing as she stepped through the store. Smelled like coffee and cleaning supplies. A couple of customers browsed the aisles, a cashier leaned on the counter scrolling through his phone, and a security camera blinked lazily in the corner. Tasha made her way through the store, grabbing a few essentials: bread, oat milk, a bottle of water. She found the tea her mom liked and tossed it into the basket. Her phone buzzed. Her mom was calling. "Hey Ma." She answered, balancing the phone between her ear and shoulder while reaching for her wallet. "Hey baby, you want on your way home? Almost just grabbing your tea. Anything else?" Her mother chuckled. "No, that's all. You sure you're okay? You sound tired." Tasha exhaled, adjusting the strap of her laptop bag. "Yeah, just one of those days. I'll be home soon." She walked toward the checkout, still talking, but slowed as she dug through her purse, pulling out some cash. She didn't like using her card at these small stores. Too many stories about card skimmers. That's when she noticed the clerk staring, a white guy. Maybe in his early 40s, his eyes darted between her and the register, lips pressed tight. At first she ignored it. Maybe he was just zoning out, but when he subtly leaned over and whispered something to the guy's stocking shelves nearby, her stomach twisted. She'd seen that look before. She hung up the call and stepped forward, placing her items on the counter. The clerk barely made eye contact at all. He muttered. She nodded, sliding the bills across the counter. He hesitated before taking them, glancing toward the front of the store. Tasha followed his gaze. Two police officers had just walked in. They weren't looking around like regular customers. They were looking for someone. And then one of them pointed straight at her. But before she could react, they were already walking toward her. Tasha barely had time to process what was happening before the two officers, one stocky with a buzz cut, the other tall and lanky, closed in. "Ma'am, we need to speak with you," the buzzcut officer said, his voice flat, authoritative. She blinked, caught off guard. "Me, what's going on?" The cashier shifted uncomfortably behind the counter, but avoided her eyes. The taller officer adjusted his belt. "We got a call about a suspicious individual, matching your description." Her stomach dropped. Suspicious. She glanced around the store. Wasn't even crowded. Just a woman near the frozen section, and a teenage boy flipping through a magazine. "What are you talking about?" she asked, forcing herself to stay calm. "I'm just buying groceries." The buzz-cut officer's expression didn't change. "Do you have ID on you?" Tasha's fingers curled around her wallet. "For what? What exactly am I being accused of?" The tension thickened. The other officer sighed, like he was already tired of dealing with her. "A store employee reported someone acting suspiciously, looking around too much, counting money." Tasha let out a sharp laugh, disbelief bubbling up in her chest. "Are you serious? Since when is counting my own money a crime?" Neither officer flinched. The cashier finally spoke up, his voice quieter than before. She was hesitating at the shelves, looked like she was watching to see if anyone was looking. Tasha turned to him, eyes wide. "I was trying to decide between brands." "You really think I came in here to steal tea and oat milk?" The buzz-cut cop took a step closer. "Ma'am, lower your voice." Her breath caught. She wasn't even yelling. She suddenly felt all eyes on her. The teenager had stopped flipping through the magazine. The older woman near the frozen section was pretending not to watch. She felt it, that shift in the air. She knew where this was going. Her heartbeat picked up. She'd seen enough viral videos, enough news reports. She knew that once things escalated, it didn't matter how right she was. She swallowed hard and pulled out her ID, her hands steady, even though her pulse was racing. The officer barely glanced at it. "Step aside, please," he ordered. "We need to ask you some questions." But before she could respond, the other officer reached out, grabbing her by the wrist. Tasha's entire body tensed as the officer's grip tightened around her wrist. "Excuse me," she snapped, jerking her arm back. "I gave you my ID. What else do you need?" The stocky officer's face remained cold. "Step over here," he repeated, motioning toward an empty aisle near the front of the store. She could feel it now, how fast everything was spiraling. Her pulse pounded in her ears. The teenage boy put his magazine down. The older woman by the frozen section had stopped pretending to look at the bags of peas and corn. Even the cashier had backed up a little, suddenly looking very interested in the register screen. She felt exposed like a criminal. "Are you detaining me?" she asked, forcing her voice to stay steady. The tall officer scoffed. "We investigating a report. If you cooperate, this will go a lot smoother." Smoother for who? Tasha's chest tightened. She wasn't stupid. She knew how this worked. If she pushed back too hard, she'd be labeled as hostile. If she complied too quickly, she'd be treated like she was guilty. Lose. "I want to know exactly what I'm being accused of," she said, her voice firmer. "You still haven't told me." The buzzcut officer exhaled sharply as if she was exhausting him. "Ma'am, someone thought you might be shoplifting. We're doing our job." Tasha let out a bitter laugh. "You mean profiling?" The second those words left her mouth, the air shifted again. Buzzcut's eyes darkened. "Turn around." He ordered. A rush of heat shot through Tasha's body. "Oh," she shot back, stepping back instinctively. "I did nothing wrong." The taller officer reached for her. "Don't resist. Resist." Tasha's voice shot up, panic laced in every syllable. "You are not about to search me in the middle of this store like I'm some damn thief." She barely had time to react before she felt hands on her arms, forcing her to turn. The humiliation hit her like a truck right there in front of strangers. They patted her down, palms sweeping over her pockets, her back, her waist. She wanted to disappear. Her skin burned with shame. She wasn't crying. She refused to give them but her eyes stung. Her fists clenched at her sides. The store had gone silent. Even the cashier was frozen in place. Seconds stretched into eternity. And then, as if this couldn't get any worse, the bell above the door chimed. Tasha barely registered it until she heard a familiar voice, a voice that didn't ask questions, a voice that cut through the tension like a blade. "Let her go." Now, the air in the store shifted instantly. Tasha turned her head, barely able to move, with the officer's hand still on her. But she didn't need to see his face to know who had spoken. Malcolm. Her older brother stood just inside the entrance, his broad frame filling the doorway. He wasn't yelling, wasn't moving aggressively, but the weight of his presence was enough to stop everything. The officers hesitated. Buzzcut's grip on Tasha's arm loosened slightly as he turned his head toward Malcolm. "Sir, step back. This doesn't concern you." Malcolm let out a sharp breath, one of those low, dangerous chuckles that said, "You must not know who you're talking to." "Oh, it concerns me," Malcolm said, his voice smooth but firm. "That's my sister." Tasha exhaled shakily, her pulse still racing. She was furious, embarrassed. But now she felt something else. Relief. The taller officer shifted on his feet, his posture slightly more cautious. "Now, sir, we got a report." Malcolm held up a hand. "I don't care what report you got. What I see is 2 officers harassing a woman with no probable cause. You searched her, didn't find anything, and instead of letting her go, you're still holding on to her, like she's a damn suspect." Buzzcut's jaw tightened. He squared his shoulders, trying to regain control. "Sir, lower your voice." Malcolm didn't even blink. "No, you don't get to violate someone's rights and then dictate the tone of the conversation." The tension thickened. Tasha watched as the officers glanced at each other. They weren't in control anymore, and they knew it. Malcolm took a slow step forward, his gaze locked onto them. "Let me ask you something," he said, his voice calm but cutting. "Did you check the security cameras before putting your hands on her?" Silence. His eyes flicked to the cashier. "Did you tell them what you actually saw, or did you just assume the cashier opened his mouth but nothing came out?" Malcolm let out a sharp sigh. Yeah, that's what I thought. The store manager, an older man who had been pretending to mind his business, finally shuffled out from the back looking nervous. Officers. Maybe we should. Malcolm cut his eyes at him. You should have spoken up before they put their hands on her. The manager swallowed hard. Tasha felt the officer grips finally loosen, and then, as if they could sense the way the situation had turned, they took a small step back. No apology, no explanation. Just a quiet, unspoken retreat. Malcolm took another step forward. Now, unless you plan to arrest her, which you have no grounds for, you'll need to leave. Buzz Cut clenched his jaw. His hand hovered near his belt for a second. But then, without another word, he turned and walked toward the door. The taller officer hesitated, his pride still bruised, but eventually followed. Tasha watched them go, her chest rising and falling, still trying to process everything. She should have felt relieved, but instead she felt exhausted. Malcolm exhaled, shaking his head as he turned to her. You okay? She wanted to say yes. She wanted to brush it off, act like it didn't bother her. But the lump in her throat said otherwise, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she let herself feel it. Tasha stood frozen for a moment, her heart still thudding against her ribs. The officers were gone, but the damage had been done. She could still feel their hands on her, the weight of their suspicion clinging to her skin. The store felt smaller, now suffocating. Malcolm placed a hand on her shoulder, not forceful, not demanding, just steady. Tasha. His voice was softer. Now talk to me. She inhaled sharply, her hands still curled into fists. She stopped, her voice shaking more than she wanted. I was just trying to buy some damn tea. Malk's jaw tightened. She shook her head, exhaling bitterly. I wasn't loud, I wasn't rude. I did everything right, and they still. Her voice cracked, frustration bleeding into every word. She didn't need to finish the sentence. Malcolm already knew the store was painfully quiet. Now the teen air by the magazine rack quickly pretended to be interested in something else. The older woman near the frozen section had already shuffled toward the exit, but the cashier still stood there, his hands gripping the edge of the counter, eyes flicking between them like he wasn't sure whether to say something or just let them leave. Malcolm turned toward him, his expression unreadable. What's your name? The man hesitated. Tom. Malcolm nodded, slow and deliberate. Tom, tell me something. Did you actually see my sister steal, or did you just think she looked like someone who would? Tom swallowed. I didn't say she stole anything. She was looking around a lot, and with the cash, Malcolm held up a hand, stopping him. You assumed Tom had the decency to look ashamed, but that wasn't enough. Asha, still gripping her bag, finally found her voice again. Do you even know what that felt like? She asked, her tone razor sharp, being searched like I was some criminal while you stood there and let it happen. Tom opened his mouth, but no words came out. Malcolm's gaze didn't waver. You know, there's a difference between calling the police when something actually happens and calling them because you think something might happen. One of those saves lives, the other one ruins them. Tom looked down, his knuckles turning white against the counter. Tasha shook her head. Just say it, Tom. He glanced up. Say you were wrong. Silence. Her chest was still tight, the humiliation still fresh, but she refused to let him off the hook that easily. Tom finally exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. I was wrong. His voice was barely above a whisper. Tasha swallowed. It wasn't enough, but it was something. Malcolm wasn't done, though. His attention turned toward the store manager, who was lingering near the back like he was hoping to avoid eye contact. Malcolm's voice was sharp again. The older man straightened suddenly, looking very busy, with nothing. You were here the whole time. Malcolm continued. You could have stepped in, you could have said something. The manager let out a nervous breath. Look, man, I know. Malcolm cut him off. You don't get to play neutral when you see something wrong and say nothing. You're just as bad as the people doing it. The manager had no response to that. Tasha didn't either. She was drained. She just wanted to go home. Malcolm must have seen it on her face because he took a step back, giving her space. "You ready?" he asked. She nodded. "Yeah, let's on go." They turned toward the door, the automatic glass sliding. G opened with a faint hiss, but just as they stepped outside, a voice called out, "Tasha." She turned. Tom, the cashier, stood at the counter looking conflicted. She waited. He scratched his neck, looking anywhere, but at her. "I shouldn't have called them." Tasha held his gaze for a split second. She almost considered telling him it was okay, but it wasn't, and maybe that was the problem. She nodded once, acknowledging his words, but not forgiving them. Not yet. Then, without another word, she walked out. The night air hit her like a shock to the system. She inhaled deeply, trying to shake off everything that had just happened. Malcolm walked beside her in silence. It wasn't until they reached the car that she finally spoke. "I hate that this is normal," she murmured, gripping the door handle. Malcolm sighed. "It shouldn't be." Tasha exhaled sharply, then looked up at him. "What if you hadn't shown up?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. Malcolm met her gaze, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then he said, "I don't even want to think about that." Neither did she. But deep down she already knew the car ride home was quiet. Tasha stared out the window, watching the city blur past. The streetlights cast long shadows, the hum of the engine, the only thing filling the space between them. She should have felt safe. Now she was out of that store, away from those cops, no longer under the weight of their suspicion. But the feeling didn't leave. It sat in her chest, heavy, stubborn. She replayed it all. How fast it happened, how easily they dismissed her, how her voice hadn't mattered until Malcolm walked in. That was the part that kept looping in her head. She shouldn't have needed him there. She shouldn't have needed anyone at all. Malcolm must have noticed her silence because he finally spoke. "Talk to me, Tash," she exhaled, still looking out the window. "I did everything right." He didn't interrupt. He let her talk. "I was polite. I gave them my ID. I didn't TL. I didn't fight. And still..." She shook her head, laughing bitterly. "Still, it wasn't enough." Malcolm tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "I've seen this happen to other people." She continued, her voice quieter. "Now watch the videos, read the stories. And I always told myself that if it ever happened to me, I'd handle it the right way. But none of that mattered, Mal. They already made up their minds. The second they saw me," she finally turned to look at him. "So tell me, what the hell are we supposed to do?" Malcolm let out a slow breath, thinking, "We do what we've always done." Tasha scoffed. "Which is what? Fight, speak up, hold people accountable, make them uncomfortable if we have to." She rolled her eyes. "And what good does that do when people like those cops or that store clerk don't even want to change?" Malcolm turned onto their street, pulling up in front of her apartment. He shifted into park but didn't kill the engine. Then he looked at her, serious. "You saw what happened back there?" Tasha frowned. "Yeah, obviously. No, I mean you saw it." He tilted his head the way the officers backed off. "The second I started asking questions, the way the cashier suddenly had nothing to say, the way that manager damn near ran in the back when I called him out." Tasha didn't say anything. Malcolm sighed. People like them, the ones who act first and think later, they count on silence. They count on people just letting it go. But when you make them answer for it, when you make them look at themselves and say it out loud, he shook his head. "That's when things shift." She crossed her arms. "So what you think that guy Tom is suddenly a changed man, that the next time a black woman walks in he's going to treat her differently?" Malcolm shrugged. "Maybe, maybe not, but now he knows better, and if he does it again he can't pretend he didn't." Tasha leaned her head back against the seat, staring at the ceiling. She wanted to believe that she really did, but the weight of it all was too fresh, too raw for a long moment. They just sat there. Then Malcolm spoke again, softer. "This time you know this isn't on you, right?" Tasha turned her head toward him. He nodded. "You didn't cause this. You didn't do anything wrong. What happened back there? It's on them." She swallowed. "Then why does it still feel like I lost?" Malcolm's expression was unreadable for a moment. Then he reached into the back seat, grabbed a small notepad and pen and handed them to her. "What's this?" she asked. "Write it down." Tasha frowned. "Write what down?" "Everything," Malcolm said. "What happened, how they treated you, their names, badge numbers, if you caught them, the store, the time, all of it." Tasha hesitated, but Malcolm just looked at her. "Trust me," with a sigh. She clicked the pen and started writing. At first her hand moved slowly, but the more she wrote, the faster the words came, every detail, every word they said. The way the store fell silent, the way her stomach twisted when they grabbed her wrist. She filled almost a full page before she stopped staring down at the ink. Malcolm nodded approvingly. "Now you have it." Tasha let out a breath. "And what am I supposed to do with this?" "Whatever you want." He leaned back in his seat. "File a complaint, post it online, tell your story, so the next person know. WS. They're not crazy when it happens to them. Or maybe you don't do anything with it at all. Maybe you just keep it for yourself, but at least it's out of your head now." Tasha stared at the page, running her fingers over the words. It didn't change what happened. It didn't erase the anger, the frustration. But for the first time that night, she felt a little lighter. She capped the pen and set the notepad down. "You always got to be so dramatic, huh?" Malcolm smirked. "Runs in the family." She huffed out a laugh, shaking her head. "Thanks, Mal, anytime." Tasha unbuckled her seatbelt, grabbing her bag. But before she stepped out, Malcolm spoke one last time. "Hey," she turned back, "you good?" Tasha paused. She thought about the store, the way those cops looked at her, the humiliation, the fear. Then she thought about Malcolm showing up, the way he stood beside her, the way his presence alone changed everything. She inhaled deeply. "I will be." She closed the door behind her. Stories like Tasha's happen every single day. It doesn't matter if you're polite, professional, or completely innocent. When people see you through a lens of suspicion, the rules are different, but silence is what allows it to keep happening. If you witness something like this, speak up, call it out, ask questions, make them explain themselves, because accountability doesn't start with people like Malcolm showing up at the right time. It starts with all of us making sure situations like this never happen in the first place. If this story resonated with you, share it. Tell someone, start the conversation, because the only way things change is if we refuse to let them stay the same.